Hello, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about how purity culture stops us from learning. So basically what I'm going to be talking about today, is how our culture of purity and how this purity culture plays out makes it so that many of us feel like it is impossible for us to admit where we're wrong, to admit where we don't understand something, to admit where our patterns or our ways of being are causing harm. And it stops us from being able to make healthy changes to the way that we are operating, even when we become aware that we are causing harm or that we are doing something wrong. Because there's so much added baggage, emotional baggage, spiritual baggage, mental baggage, collective baggage that comes with admitting that we're wrong and admitting that we're not doing things right. That, again, comes from this purity culture that we live in. That if we can start to recognize it and we can start to process it, we can become the kind of people who love ourselves enough, who have enough self-love to be able to admit when we're wrong, to be able to admit when we're causing harm, to be able to admit when we have patterns and ways of being that are not healthy, that are not serving us, and that are not serving others, and to be able to change without making this mean that we were wrong, bad, shameful, sinful, fundamentally flawed before, and without making this mean that we are now becoming good and we are now becoming better and that we were bad before. Because again, I think a lot of us don't recognize how much baggage we all carry around with us in our culture and in our society around being wrong, around not knowing things, around causing harm, and around change that, again, come from our purity culture that stop us from being able to evolve the way that we need to evolve in order to become the kind of humans we want to be. Okay, so this is something that, again, I know I kind of say this in every video, but this is like the crux of the self-love path. The foundations of the self-love path are learning how to deal with our shame, our blame, and our guilt. Because when we can learn how to face shame, blame, and guilt in a healthy way, in a productive way, in a way where we can actually process what is under the shame, blame, and guilt, we are going to be able to understand what's actually going on with us, what's going on with the world around us, what we need, and how we can move ourselves forward. And it's actually going to give us so much power to change and become the kind of people we want to become, where we did not have that power before. Okay? So again, the mystery school. I have an entire huge section in the process of awakening to reality course that is all about processing shame, blame, and guilt. Because again, most of us have shame, blame, and guilt that we do not even recognize is shame, blame, and guilt. That we are not even seeing is a habit or as something that even could be questioned and something that could be dissected and seen differently, because it just feels so incredibly obvious to us that there's something wrong with us, that we're bad, that we're flawed, that we're making a mistake, that this is a bad part of us, that these bad behaviors that we have are bad and they're causing harm and we need to change. And there's just so much unconscious, subconscious replaying of our shame and our guilt and our blame over and over and over again. That, again, like I say, makes it so that a lot of the time we just don't even notice that it's happening. We don't even notice that it's a part of our patterning. And it is our sort of like modus operandi. And this shame, blame, and guilt stop us from being able to see the root cause of why we are doing what we're doing. It stops us from being able to see the root cause of our actual pain or what we're actually experiencing that we're trying to get rid of with the shame, blame, and guilt. It stops us from being able to process our past and our history and what we've been through, right? So all of us who are trying to do our shadow work, who are trying to heal our inner child, who are trying to do all of these things so that we can process our past and process what we've been through, but we're struggling to really make progress with it. We're struggling to connect with parts of ourselves. We're struggling to connect with our inner child. We're struggling to be able to like actually ground our understandings and what we are getting out of our processing time into our current lived reality. And usually this, again, is because we are stuck in shame, blame, and guilt in a way that we don't recognize. And it's blocking us, again, from being able to do true processing work. It's blocking us from being able to see root cause of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And again, that obviously blocks us from being able to do anything different other than to continue to shame, blame, and guilt ourselves and think that we're going to hate our way into becoming a person that we like. Yeah? And we just get in this cycle over and over and over again. And then self-help and spirituality comes in and reinforces all of that shame, blame, and guilt. So much of our spirituality, personal growth, and these tools that are supposed to be these tools of liberation are still founded on the foundation that there's something inherently wrong, bad, shameful, or broken about us that needs to be fixed. And that is why we are doing the wrong things that we're doing. That's why we're doing the harmful things we're doing. That's why we're in pain. That's why we don't have the relationships we want to have, or the abundance we want to have, or the anything that we wish we could achieve in life. We're being told, well, there's some sort of block or some sort of wrong thing inside of you that needs to be fixed first. And then that's how we're going to get there, right? And we don't recognize that as shame, blame, and guilt, because it doesn't feel like we're shaming, blaming, and guilting ourselves. But that's what that is. This idea that there is some fundamental flaw within us that's causing us to do what we're doing, or that's causing us to experience what we're experiencing, is shame, blame, and guilt. So like I say, this is why in the mystery school I talk so deeply about this. Because to really come on board and come online with the awareness we need to have in order to be able to recognize our shame, blame, and guilt. Just that, to be able to see how much we are shaming, blaming, and guilting ourselves is a huge step. To become aware of our shame, blame, and guilt is a huge step. Because again, like I said, for most of us, it's just a natural, it seems like a natural, obvious, I should be mad at myself. This is a bad thing about me. Look at the pain it's causing, right? So when we engage in our self-sabotaging behaviors, when we binge, when we drink, when we yell at our spouses or our partners, when we watch hours and hours and hours of TV and zone out, and we don't do our exercises, and we don't do our meditation, and we feel like we're failing at life, there's an automatic reaction of like, well, yeah, that's bad. That's bad. It's bad that I did that. It's bad that I'm doing that. because look at the bad, negative outcomes. It doesn't make me happy. It doesn't make me fulfilled. It ruins my relationships. It ruins my body. I'm wasting my life. I'm wasting my time. And for most of us, right, we don't say, okay, I need to have some compassion for myself. It seems like, no, this is really a bad thing. This is really a wrong thing. It's causing harm. It's causing damage. And I need to fix it. I need to change it. I need to get rid of it. I need to become disciplined. I need to do whatever I need to do to fix, change, alter myself so that I won't do this anymore and I won't be this way anymore. Yeah? And it's like that automatic thing. And like I say, and then spirituality, self-help, and personal growth comes in. And most of the time, they say, yeah, this is a bad thing about you. This is your ego. This is your lower self. This is you being negative. This is a low vibration. This is something wrong with your childhood or whatever. This is trauma. The overdiagnosis of everything being trauma now. And there's still this underlying assumption, right? There's still the underlying, and this is a thing that you need to fix about yourself. You are doing something wrong. You're getting a bad outcome. You need to fix that about yourself. That's the underlying narrative. Yeah? And I want you to understand, first and foremost, what we're looking at there is purity culture. You are doing something wrong. You are getting a negative outcome. There's something fundamentally wrong with you that is happening. Anytime that's the message, there's something wrong with you, that you are doing what you're doing. There's something wrong with you, that you are doing what you're doing, that you're thinking what you're thinking, that your habits are what they are. You're broken, you're bad, you're shameful, you are an addict, you are whatever. We put all these labels, but it all comes down to this is a bad thing about you. We need to understand that is purity culture. Okay? Purity culture is you are fundamentally flawed. Anything that you do, anything that you are, anything about you that isn't perfect, that isn't pure, that isn't the highest thing that it could possibly be, is broken, bad, wrong, shameful, sinful, fundamentally flawed, and is in need of saving, fixing, rescuing. So we may not be part of a fundamentalist religion, and we may not consider ourselves to be fundamentally religious or religious in any way. But if we still look at ourselves and anything that we do as being flawed by nature, we need to understand we are operating within purity culture. Okay? That's what that is. That's what that looks like. That's how that plays out. Anytime we look at ourselves and we just think, why am I doing this? What is wrong with me that I'm like this? What is wrong with me that I'm like this? What is wrong with me that I do this? What is wrong with me that everyone else seems to be able to get on with their life and I can't? That is us in purity culture. Okay, so what this purity culture does, it then obfuscates the actual root cause of why we are how we are and why we're doing what we're doing. Because in real reality, unless we are a literal diagnosable psychopath or sociopath, which I guarantee you, no one who's listening to this is. As I can just pretty much say a blanket statement. If you're listening to this, you are not a sociopath and you are not a psychopath. you probably have on the spectrum normal empathy, normal levels of cognition, probably higher levels of cognition, higher levels of empathy. You are not a sociopath, you are not a psychopath. Therefore, everything that you're doing, every pattern that you have, every behavior pattern, every thought pattern, every emotional pattern, every way that you scapegoat, deny, everything that you use to numb yourself, or whatever it is that you do, everything is your attempt at keeping yourself safe and getting your needs met. The only way you physically, embodiedly know how. So the next level of this, the next layer of this, is to understand that most of us have a discrepancy between what our conscious intellect knows and understands and what our physical bodies, our nervous systems, and our patterns are programmed to do. This is part of why purity culture can perpetuate itself so easily, is because we all, pretty much all of us, right, have parts of self, have parts of our being, have patterns, have things that we do and things we engage in that intellectually, again, we can see cause harm, hurt ourselves or hurt other people, that don't get our goals met, that take us out of our experience, that whatever it is, seem bad, wrong, shameful, guilty, and we think it must be bad, it must be shameful, it must be something I need to fix or get rid of. Because my mind understands that it's causing harm. My mind understands that it's not what I want. But it's like something else takes over. And we feel like there's this other part of ourselves, these other aspects of self that are doing things that our intellect doesn't want to do. So it's even easier for us to say, no, see, like that's a bad thing. That's a bad part. And sometimes we like deeply identify with it, right? Like sometimes it's like, okay, like my mind can understand that I don't want to do this and my mind can understand that this isn't right. But then this is just who I am. This is just what I do. And I'm broken and I'm flawed. And it's like, and again, I can understand in my mind that I shouldn't be doing this. I can understand in my mind that this is harmful. I can have all these other ideas of what I should be doing instead. But this keeps happening because I'm broken. I'm bad. I'm wrong. I'm shameful. And this, again, is that obfuscation of what's actually going on, what we're actually feeling, what we're actually experiencing, what our histories are, why our patterns are the way that they are, and what we actually need in order to change. So, again, we can be in a state where what we're doing is objectively harmful. It is objectively causing us harm and it is causing other people harm. And we, as empathic, caring, loving beings, can want nothing more than to change and to be better and to be different and to not do what we're doing. And we can have all the ideas in our head of what we could do instead, of how we could do better, of what could be different. And we can be at a place where we simply cannot get ourselves to do anything different, where we cannot break our habits, where we can white knuckle our way into doing something different for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and then we fall back into our old habits, and we just perpetually just think, there's something wrong about me, I don't have enough willpower, why am I not motivated, what is it that, right? What is wrong with me that I keep doing this? And that's just the theme. because no one is letting us know that the real truth behind everything that you're doing, every pattern that you have, every seeming self-sacrificing, self-sabotaging, numbing, scapegoating, harmful behavior is your attempt to keep yourself safe based on the patterns that you grew up with, based on how you adapted to the environment that you were in, based on you doing what you needed to do from your childhood perspective of what kept you safe, what got your needs met, what suppressed or denied the parts of yourself that your caregivers or the authority figures around you didn't like, that were an existential threat to you. Because, again, remember, being disapproved of was the greatest threat to our survival growing up. So any part of self, any behavior, anything that was natural to us that got us rejected, blamed, shamed, or guilted by anyone on the outside, then became a thing we became afraid of in ourselves, that we then learned to suppress, deny, try to get rid of. And then these parts of self become our shadow. They don't get to grow, and they come up, and they express, and they do what they're going to do from a shadowed place, not from a healthy embodied place. Or, again, we learn codependency. We learn to numb and run and escape. We learn to fight and be violent. We learn that we need to do these things in order to be safe. And then we come into our adulthoods and we just keep repeating these patterns. Not because we're bad, not because we're wrong, not because we're shameful, sinful, broken, but because this is what we learned we had to do and had to be in order to survive. And it's like we all have some sort of like amnesia about our childhoods and about what our past was. Because to contextualize our own experience is incredibly difficult when we had our own experience and everything seemed normal to us. Right? Like we can have a kind of understanding that like maybe our history was traumatic, or maybe our childhood wasn't the best, or whatever. And for most of us, we don't even have that. We think my childhood was fine. Everything was fine. I was fine. There was food on the table. I got to go to school. Not everything was perfect, but it was okay. And yet, right, as an adult, I have chronic anxiety and chronic depression and chronic people pleasing and all of these things. And what's wrong with me that I do that? And we are not realizing that it's like, those are the habits you developed to keep yourself safe in an environment where you weren't safe to just be yourself. So fundamentally, every single part of yourself, every single behavior that you do, every pattern that you have, as nonsensical, as self-sabotaging, as painful or harmful that it may be, is you doing the best you know to do based on what you have experienced. And then on top of that, it's you doing the best you can based on what you know, which for a lot of us is not everything. I guarantee you, for every one of us is not everything. We are acting from our current level of understanding of how the world works, of how we work, of how we think everything is. And again, we need to understand that our worldview is how we orient ourselves in this life. Okay? So we're just going to take a pause first before I move on to my next point. Everything that you're doing is something you are doing. Every habit you have, every pattern of harm towards yourself and others is coming from you doing the best you know to do to keep yourself safe and to keep yourself alive based on your experience. That is at the root of every single thing. Every person I work with, right? When we work one-on-one, when they go through the mystery school, whatever it is, and they earnestly do this work. They earnestly do this self-compassion, self-love work. Will discover that every single part of themselves that they thought was bad, wrong, shameful, sinful, harmful, guilty, that they have been working for years in the self-help personal growth world to fix and change. They are always going to first go through the process of discovering that what is actually behind that horrible behavior that they hate. That horrible part of themselves that is ruining their life and ruining their relationships and all these things is an innocent part that's just trying to keep them safe and alive. That it came from somewhere. That it came from learning that this is the only way to cope with life, to navigate life, to be and not get harmed, to not express something that I shouldn't be expressing, to be something that I'm not, to not be something that I am, to avoid getting attacked or antagonized. It always comes down to that. So now, does this mean that we can't change and that we can't grow and that we can't evolve these parts? No, of course not. This is how we evolve them, is we learn what our current way of being is doing for us. That's the compassionate curiosity part. Is that instead of trying to just stop ourselves from doing our behavior, to stop ourselves and force ourselves to change and be different, without understanding why we're doing what we're doing, we understand the actual need that the current behavior, the current way we are doing things is meeting. When we get overwhelmed, we have no tools for dealing with that, we're going to numb out. So the more we can start to recognize when we're becoming overwhelmed, first thing. The next thing is that we start to recognize and learn other tools for dealing with overwhelm that don't involve sitting in front of the TV for 5 hours so that we can just numb out. Right? We learn how to mindfully show up for overwhelm and stress. And then we need the TV less and less. We learn how to show up for ourselves in our sadness, in our anger. We learn how to stand up for ourselves. We learn how to create boundaries. We learn how to change our whole lives sometimes. And then we find that we no longer need those past behaviors. We don't become not something. We don't just stop ourselves. We don't just transcend and force ourselves to meditate instead of being in front of the TV. We learn what we are actually needing. We learn, again, where we learned this behavior. We learn that we're being triggered into feeling antagonized, even when that's not necessarily happening. We learn to show up for the parts of ourselves that still feel like I'm that trapped child when someone yells at us or when someone's mean to us. And we start to re-identify with the adult part of ourselves. So again, this is why the mystery school is so long, because there's so many ways in which we need to process this. But it all starts with that compassionate curiosity, which is the opposite of purity culture. Purity culture says there's something wrong with me that I'm doing this. The self-love path says I have a good reason for doing this. That doesn't necessarily excuse the behavior. It's not an excuse. It's not trying to say that it's okay, especially if there's harm. We don't have to say it's okay that I feel really shitty after drinking all weekend. And I'm okay with that. But what we say is, I'm not broken, bad, wrong, or shameful that I did that. Why did I do that? What did that do for me? What was all the stuff that led up to me doing that? What need did the drinking meet? How can I start to meet that need in a new way, right? We have these conversations with ourselves. We do this processing work. We learn new tools. We learn new ways. And this, again, is the opposite of purity culture. That just says you need to just stop that, you need to be different, you need to be transcended, you need to change, you need to be fixed. There's some miracle thing you can do in a session or in a weekend seminar or in a book. We become accustomed to the idea that this is going to be a process, that we are going to have to slowly learn new ways, and that changing our patterns is hard. Not because we're bad, wrong, shameful, broken, sinful, but because our bodies currently believe that our current patterns are the things that are keeping us alive. So to change, to do something different, the body doesn't trust that yet. And so we slowly try new things. We slowly integrate new things into our routine. And we slowly shift to new ways of being. And over time, we will find we can change via self-support, not self-blame. Self-support, not self-blame. That's always the path. Okay, so understanding why we're doing what we're doing. If our understanding of why we're doing what we're doing is not rooted in self-compassion, yeah, this makes sense, of course I developed this, it is not self-awareness. If our self-awareness is, this is bad about me, this is my ego, this is a broken part of me, this is my fundamental flaw, this is my fundamental sin, this is my broken brain, this is my broken self, it is not self-awareness. That's purity culture. And the goal of purity culture is to keep us in a perpetual state of self-hate, a perpetual state of navel-gazing, a perpetual state of believing we are fundamentally not good enough, fundamentally unworthy, that the ways that we cause harm to ourselves and others are shameful, bad, wrong, sinful, horrible about us. And thus we need to be saved or rescued by someone or something outside of ourselves. We need to buy something. We need to be transcended. We need to be healed. We need to... So that we are constantly in a battle with ourselves, because that is never going to work. Right now, you understand why that is never going to work. Because what you're doing right now, how you are right now, is how you're meeting your needs. It's how you're keeping yourself safe. That's what this is. Always, every time. You're doing your best to keep yourself alive. You're doing your best to keep yourself safe. And there's no way to change that until we validate all of that. We validate what we've been through. We validate how we got to where we are. And then we slowly learn new ways of getting our same needs met in better ways. And we evolve that way. Purity culture keeps telling us, no, this is wrong, bad, shameful about you. You need to be disciplined. You need to do your ego eradication. You need to be saved by whatever. And so we never change. we can never actually change. This is how purity culture stops us from ever being able to change. Because it keeps us hating ourselves. It keeps us blaming ourselves. It keeps us dissociated and disconnected from parts of ourselves. It keeps saying you need to transcend your emotions and get rid of your negative emotions and get rid of your triggers and just see everything non-dually and have compassion for everyone who harmed you, without actually going through the process that we need to go through to get to that place. So we are constantly stuck in this navel gazing, in trying to fix ourselves, in trying to improve ourselves. And that is what distracts us from ever being able to question the system or change anything, to demand that things are better, because we're too busy trying to fix ourselves. That is the point of purity culture. It keeps the patriarchy going. It keeps the systems of oppression and domination going. Purity culture is set up so that we are constantly in a battle with ourselves, so that we will not question the systems and we will not be a part of the change. And it works perfectly because, again, most of us can see that the things that we're doing are causing harm to ourselves and others. And again, I guarantee you that most of what you do that causes you harm and causes other people harm is based on your experience in the system. It's based on you being antagonized by the system, not getting your needs met, being told that you're wrong, bad, shameful, guilty, horrible. And then you are coping with that. You are responding to that in a normal, healthy, how humans should respond to an unhealthy system. And then the system is seeing, see, we were right. You're messed up. Fix that. Right? We are responding to a work environment that is inhumane, where we are in constant competition with one another, where there's no social safety nets, where we don't have universal health care, or you can be fired at any moment, or unreasonable working hours, all of this stuff. We are responding to that with anxiety and depression and needing to numb out at night and overeating and drinking. We're responding to an inhumane system in the only ways we know how to respond: negative emotions and coping mechanisms and self-sabotage. And then the system turns around and says, see, you're bad, you're flawed, there's something wrong with you. And we go, yeah, there is, because look at the negative outcomes. And I'm the cause, I'm the one doing it. And then they're like, don't worry, we can sell you the solution. Self-help, personal growth, spirituality. Get rid of it, change it, and you see how the loop just goes round and round and round and round? This is what purity culture is. It is in everything. Purity culture says our current culture is right. Everything that we're doing is how it should be. And you should just be able to be perfect and equanimous and balanced no matter what. And if you're not, there's something shameful, wrong, bad, broken about you, that you can't go along with the way that things are and be happy and healthy. Okay, how can we adapt to an inhumane system while also loving ourselves? This is a big part of it. This is again why the mystery school is so long and why I work with one-on-one clients, but also like that I put out 1 million of these videos. We need to start with this work of self-compassion, assuming innocence in ourselves instead of assuming guilt, starting to realize and recognize where we are living in constant shame, blame, and guilt, where purity culture has us. We start with becoming aware of it. The first step is awareness. Where are you blaming, shaming, and guilting yourself for your response? And like I say, this is really hard because we are not going to be aware of why. We are not going to be aware of where our patterns came from. We are going to think, no, I am the one who is just broken. I am the exception to this rule. My thing is a bad thing. This is a thing that really just needs to be fixed in me. We all think that. So the beginning of this is the same for all of us. Can you start to become aware of where you're shaming and blaming and guilting yourself? And can you start to lean into compassion instead? What if I'm not broken? What if I'm not bad? What if this is my way of getting my needs met? What if this is my way of trying to be safe? Yeah, so it may seem weird, but it's more comfortable for me to assume that it's my fault to feel in control. That is the childhood coping mechanism. Okay, remember, when we were in our childhoods, we had no control over our circumstances. We had no control over how our caregivers were treating us, over literally anything. The only thing that we could control, and again, I say this in almost every video because it's hard. It's hard for us to get it. But this is something we need to get. The only thing we had control over in our childhoods was our own behavior. The only hope we had in our childhoods for anything getting better in our lives was to assume it was our fault and to try to fix ourselves. You see? Purity culture perpetuates this. Purity culture hooks into this and says, yeah, it is. It's you. You're broken. You're the one. If you fix yourself, you'll fix all of this. Because that is what makes us feel in control. We learned that in childhood. That was our first childhood coping mechanism. Any pain that I can make my fault, I give myself hope that if I fix myself, I will feel better. Does this make sense? That's why that feels so good. If we can figure out how it's our fault, we think that's going to mean I can change myself. And then if I change myself, I'll change my outcomes. That's the first program we ever got in our subconscious. Does this make sense? That's the childhood part trying to save us when we're in pain. Shame, blame, and guilt is the childhood part of ourselves that is then reinforced by purity culture. Blaming and shaming and guilting us in the hopes that that will change how we are being responded to. So this is why, for a lot of us, it's so hard for us to see beyond our shame, blame, and guilt. Because we think then, well, if it's not my fault, then I'm stuck in this forever. If it's not something bad, wrong, shameful, broken about me, then how am I ever going to fix it? But again, I always say, okay, well, let's take a step back. Has shaming, blaming, or guilting yourself ever actually helped you change? Has shaming, blaming, or guilting yourself ever actually helped you change? We have to be realistic. Does it keep you in loops, or does it help you actually change? And I can guarantee you, it's never actually helped you change. Not long term. It may have given you some temporary results, right? A lot of us can willpower our way for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, usually only a couple of days. But we always go back to our old habits. because we're not doing the actual work to figure out what we need, why we're doing what we're doing, how we adapted, and what we need now to be able to do something different. Right? Purity culture says you should just be able to change. Real reality says it's going to be a process of compassion and really learning to be on our own side, no matter what, and figuring out where we are actually coming from and why we're doing it. Okay? So that's the first part. And then the second part is we are acting from our current worldview. We're acting from our current understanding of how reality works, from the information we currently have. And for most of us, again, because of how purity culture works, we are afraid to learn new things. We are afraid to expand our awareness of how reality works, of how other people work, of how what is right and wrong, what is good and bad, because it destabilizes us. Okay, so like when we look out at the world and we see all these people who are just spreading misinformation, who are speaking nonsense, who are clearly wrong and then are shown evidence of how they are wrong, and they somehow figure out a way of just like, not seeing it, not changing, not growing. And we look at that and we're like, how can you deny reality like that? We have to understand that what that is called is cognitive bias. And the reason we have that is because we are trying to make ourselves feel safe in the idea that we understand reality. Because how we view the world, what our current worldview is how we are making our decisions. It's how we're navigating the complexity that we're facing. And when we find out we're wrong about something, it can be incredibly destabilizing to our entire worldview. And to change is destabilizing to our worldview and to how we operate. And so most of us will fight and defend what we currently know and what we currently believe, even if what we currently know and currently believe is painful and causes us to harm ourselves and harm others. Because again, to change, first and foremost, means that we have to rearrange how we think about a lot of things, how we do a lot of things. And that's overwhelming for people. And then the second thing is what usually comes up with that is shame. That I didn't already know, that I didn't know better, I did something wrong. And this is that next part of the shame of purity culture. That if you were wrong, if you didn't already know, if you come to realize that your opinion was incorrect or your view was incorrect, that you caused harm, that you hurt other people, that you hurt yourself, most of us then feel like that challenges our ability to see ourselves as a good person. Right? We all want to see ourselves as good. We all want to see ourselves as doing good things and being a positive impact on the world. None of us want to walk around and think I'm horrible and causing harm. That's why I'm saying I can guarantee you no one listening to this is a sociopath or psychopath. You don't get off on the idea that you hurt other people. We all want to believe that we are good, that we are doing good, that we are a positive impact on the planet. And in purity culture, we learn that if you're wrong and if you cause harm and if you make a mistake, you are bad. You are fundamentally bad. You are fundamentally sinful. You are fundamentally broken. And we want to run from that. And I think that that's because it's coming from a place again of innocence. It's understanding that we are fundamentally good and we are fundamentally innocent and we are fundamentally doing our best. And in real reality, on the self-love path, we get to develop tools where we can admit that we were wrong. We can admit that we caused harm. We can admit that we didn't know something, that we were operating in ignorance, that we spread misinformation, that we did whatever we did, and that we are still fundamentally good and worthy of love. What we are really running from when we are avoiding being called out or when we're avoiding the consequences of our actions, when we're avoiding the call out, when we don't want to take responsibility for the harm we've caused, what we're really running from is this idea that means I'm admitting that I'm fundamentally bad, wrong, shameful, broken, horrible, sinful. And that means I'm never going to be loved again and I'm never going to be safe again. What we're all really afraid of is not accountability. We're not afraid of admitting that we made a mistake. We're not afraid of admitting that we caused harm. We're not even afraid of restorative justice. We're afraid that what it means about us is that we are fundamentally bad, and that means we are going to be fundamentally rejected and denied love and denied safety for the rest of our lives. Right? Purity culture says you are only worthy of love and connection and all the things that humans need if you are good. Because purity culture needs us to stick with the program. Purity culture needs us to be people who are willing to do whatever we have to do to be good in the system so that the system doesn't say, well, you are unworthy of love now. And again, that's a childhood trauma that's now being played out in society over and over and over again. Because in childhood, our perspective was, in order to be safe, in order to get my needs met, in order to have everything that I want and everything that I need to be loved by someone outside of myself. I cannot meet my own needs. I cannot show up for myself. I can't even understand. I don't understand how the world works. I don't understand how I work. All I know is when I'm being loved and understood by these people around me, I get my needs met. And when I'm not, I don't. And again, we learn to perceive that anytime we're not getting our needs met, anytime we are being antagonized, anytime we're not safe, we learn to look for what did I do wrong to cause that, even if it had nothing to do with us. Even if it was just that our caregivers were overwhelmed that day, or they didn't have access, they didn't have resources, there's still going to be a part of us that blamed ourselves and that believed, see, the reason I'm suffering is because I'm bad. So in our adulthoods, we don't want to admit that we did something wrong, that we caused harm, that we weren't correct. Because there's this deep association that means, well, then I'm going to be rejected and then I'm going to suffer. So we will do anything we can to distract and deflect that. Because we really believe I'm going to be then rejected. And I'm going to not be safe. Purity culture stops us from being able to admit when we are wrong and admit when we cause harm. Because purity culture says only the people who are good and who are pure are worthy of love and not suffering. So if you have to admit that you're not one of the good people, you really believe you're submitting to suffering forever on some level. So learning that restorative justice exists, learning that we can make a mistake and say sorry and be forgiven and still be okay and still be safe is a practice. And it's a way we come out of this purity culture and into true reality. We learn how to get called out. We learn how to see. We learn how to understand. We learn how to admit without making that mean that we are fundamentally bad, wrong, shameful, broken, sinful. And without that having to mean I now suffer with being, isolated and rejected for the rest of my life. We need to develop the self-love tools to help us get there. So this is how purity culture is in everything. If you are not good by purity culture standards, there's something bad, wrong, shameful, broken about you. And you need to fix that. Or you need to deny it, because if you admit it, you're going to suffer forever. Those are the two worlds we're walking. And that's again why this self-love path is so radical. To be able to understand that we can cause harm to ourselves and others and still be fundamentally innocent. And then learn how to change without making that mean that we were wrong, bad, shameful, sinful before, but just doing what we knew to do to get our needs met is the whole game. Purity culture keeps us stuck. So long as we're believing there's something fundamentally wrong with who and what we are, we can never change and we can never grow. We will stay stuck in our patterns, or we will stay stuck in denial. And that's how purity culture keeps itself going. That's how our system keeps itself going. Through either us hating, blaming, shaming, guilting ourselves all the time, or staying stuck in patterns of harm that we can't change because we can't admit we're wrong and we can't admit we didn't know, because that means too much about who we think we are, and it means too much about you're now just going to suffer forever. You're going to be isolated forever. You're going to be rejected forever. You're going to be seen as bad, wrong, and broken forever. And then that means that we're so busy navel-gazing or defending ourselves that we can't see the systems for how they work, and we can't be a part of something new because we're too busy. We're too distracted. And it's taking those childhood perspectives and turning it into culture. It's playing on our childhood ways of viewing the world and perpetuating them instead of allowing us to evolve them. So does this make sense? Do we have any questions or comments or concerns about it? This is what the mystery school is all about unpacking. And then yes, eventually it will lead us to changing the way that we operate in society. But that's a process, right? Learning to get out of purity culture is a process, and it will change your life, sometimes very radically, but not overnight, over years. And so where does it start? It starts with, where are you in shame, blame, and guilt? And how can you start to get curious and assume innocence before you even understand why? And then we start doing true self-inquiry. Why am I doing this? What is actually causing this? Where did this come from? What needs are being met? That's the actual process. Okay, so come join the mystery school, get therapy, work one-on-one with somebody, watch my videos, watch other people's self-love videos. There's lots of tools and resources to help you do this. But you have to be committed to the process. You can't just sort of sometimes do it. Right? You got to commit to the awareness of your shame, blame, and guilt, and commit to the questioning of it. It's a job because it's totally different than what most of us are trained to do. But if you commit to it over time, it will totally change your life. Okay? Okay. But this is purity culture. I am not good unless I am perfect. And perfect means towing the line. I love how intelligently blunt you are. Thank you so much. It gives us escape. No escape. Yeah. But I don't want you to have an escape. I want you to have the real thing. Right? Okay. Thank you for being here. You are fundamentally innocent. So if that's the truth, then what? Let's move from there. Okay. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in a week. And until then, have a good week. And yeah, you're great.